We took a call on, what day is it today, Keith? Thank you. We took a call on Monday. I took it for a drink on Tuesday. No, we took a call on Monday, and it was a nice lad, a perfectly pleasant caller, and he suggested that the reason why Donald Trump is doing what he's doing, which was a sort of fundamental question that I was asking you on Monday, was in order to, quotes, manipulate the markets.
There was a moment earlier this week that, at first, didn't seem like much, just another caller, just another opinion. But looking back now, it feels like something much bigger was hiding in plain sight. Before we dive into the full story, comment where you're watching from, and don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. So here's what happened. A caller suggested that the reason Donald Trump has been acting the way he has recently might come down to one thing: influencing the markets. At the time, it sounded like a bold claim, maybe even a stretch. But then the sequence of events began to line up. Just before the announcement that peace negotiations with Iran were supposedly underway, there were already signs that something had shifted. Movements in the market didn't come after the news. They appeared to begin just before it. And then came the contradiction. Roughly 40 minutes after that announcement, Iran responded, not with confirmation, but with a complete denial. No negotiations, no discussions, no awareness of what was being claimed. So now you have two completely different narratives unfolding at the same time. On one side, the President of the United States announcing progress toward peace. On the other, the Iranian government effectively saying, this isn't happening. And that's where the situation becomes difficult to ignore. Because if negotiations were real, you would expect both sides to acknowledge them, even cautiously. But instead, what we're seeing is a disconnect so sharp that it raises serious questions about what is actually going on behind the scenes. And then, as more details begin to surface, the story becomes even harder to dismiss. Because alongside these conflicting statements, reports emerge that significant activity took place in the oil markets just minutes before the announcement was made. Not after, before. And suddenly, that earlier suggestion, the idea that market behavior and political messaging might be connected, no longer feels like speculation. It feels like something that deserves closer attention.
And Donald Trump decided to set fire to. But, as I say, I'm not sure we want to go down that particular avenue today, because what is now being reported on both sides of the Atlantic is that about $500 million in bets on the oil market were placed minutes before President Trump announced that the United States would postpone strikes on Iranian energy targets. So the statement came in at about 11:05 on Monday, and prior to that, about $500 million worth of bets. Think how rich you need to be, what circle you need to be in, to be part of a movement that can lay its hands on $500 million. I mean, what if it's not even a risk? What if I am saying to you, all right, I've got $500 million, but I can't afford to bet it in case I lose. And you say to me, you can't possibly lose, because we know exactly what is going to happen. As soon as the president announces that peace negotiations are underway, then the price of oil will drop. It might go back up again, so the only risk you're taking is deciding when to cash in the profits that you've made on the fall in oil prices. But there's no real risk involved, because I can categorically guarantee to you that the price will come down. About 15 minutes before that social media post, 5,100 lots relating to the future cost of North Sea-sourced Brent crude and US-sourced West Texas intermediate crude changed hands. An unprecedented scale of trade, and it's all visible in black and white on the London Stock Exchange Group data. This doesn't even take into account these weird new markets where you can use cryptocurrency or Bitcoin to place effective bets on almost anything, including the movement of various markets. This, if you like, is on the outside. This, if you like, is in daylight. This is unfolding in front of us. $500 million. $500 million in bets on, well, on the inevitable consequences of Donald Trump making the announcement that he made. And what do you do now? Because remember I said to you on Monday that we had arrived in a place where the theocratic propaganda machine of the Iranian regime was saying one thing and the President of the United States of America was saying the other. and you were not confident that one was telling the truth and one was lying. You were not supremely confident that you could call it. I think we probably mostly lean towards the Iranian regime on the principle of the stopped clock, and also on the principle of if they were negotiating, why wouldn't they say so? So you've got, and this is certainly the point that's been made by a lot of people in the United States of America, some of whom were once sympathetic, if not to Trump, then certainly to the Republican Party. So we've got something that you can't quite believe. I think this is why I was obsessed about 3 months ago with normalcy or normality bias. Do you remember? I said, just can't quite let go of the idea that things can't be quite as bonkers as they actually are. Well, I let go of it successfully, and I hope I've helped you to do so as well. Or indeed, if you were there before I was, thank you for helping me get there. But the liberation, the sense of liberation you get from just acknowledging that you have to see everything now through the lens of his deranged dishonesty. It's funny watching august right-wing leaning commentators come around to this point of view in the last few days. Andrew Neil doing it in the Daily Mail today, Daniel Finkelstein in the Times. The latter, of course, are much more reliable guide to events than the former, who was halfway up Trump's bottom not too long ago. But the final realization that you are wasting your time if you try to deploy traditional tools of analysis with this man, because everything is, if not depraved, and I believe that it is, then just fundamentally dishonest. So you've got these two things, right? The first is we have arrived in a place where we would probably trust the murderous theocratic propaganda machine coming out of Tehran more than we would trust the President of the United States of America on this very specific question. That is inconceivable. And now we find ourselves contemplating the possibility of Donald Trump being complicit in a massive scam, a $500 million scam. And the question remains, is that plausible? Do you think that's possible? What does Occam's razor tell us? How else would you account for $500 million being placed on bets contingent upon a massive shift in oil prices just moments before Donald Trump made an announcement absolutely stone cold guaranteed to make a massive shift in oil prices? And again, you sort of find yourself looking at the ground beneath your feet and wondering whether it's some sort of illusion or some sort of mirage. I want to come at the moment from two angles this morning, and they're quite different, actually. My thanks to Robert here for reminding me or informing me. I can't remember whether I ever knew this. I opened the programme trying to recall what the difference was between the left brain and the right brain. The left hemisphere is abstraction. Facts. It attends to the parts, writes Robert in Malmesbury. The right seeks to comprehend the whole big picture. And that's where my brain is today. I've got two very different but entirely linked questions for you. The first is prosaic, quotidian, the normal. And that is, just tell everybody listening, what signs you are already seeing of the impact of this, because we haven't done that properly. I've given you the big headlines, the banners about the IEA saying that this oil crisis is going to be worse than the 70s. I've given you the Gulf states saying that this is the new Suez. But what I haven't given you is I can't afford to renew my mortgage, or I might have to sell my... Do you see what I mean? So what I want to know is, because what's going to happen, and once again we find ourselves in the lonely position of focusing on truth and facts, you're going to get the kind of clowns and cretins who encouraged war, who claimed that we should have been hopping into Donald Trump's fetid bed and marching with him into yet another illegal engagement in the Middle East. Those clowns are going to claim that the economic impact of the war they wanted is somehow Keir Starmer's fault, even though he had the vision and the wit to stay as far out of it as he reasonably could. So all of the columnists, all of the commentators, all of the politicians who detached themselves entirely from evidence-based truth back in 2016 and veer ever further from it through the straits of Boris Johnson, through the canal of Liz Truss, through the seas of austerity and the oceans of Brexit, they sail ever further away from observable truth and evidence. They'll be lying to you soon, if they're not already, about the economic impacts of Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu's illegal war somehow being the fault of Keir Starmer. So we need to get in twice. We need to get in on what the economic impacts already are. How are you being hit? 0345 6060 973. You're trying to book a holiday. You're trying to renew your mortgage. You're trying to fill the car. You're trying to fill a trolley in Morrison's, whatever it is. You've just gone, and you may not even have realised that, oh, blimey, that's because of the war. But you have noticed that's just gone up by an amount that I can't quite credit. Friend's mortgage broker told her yesterday the world is on fire. Someone else told me yesterday that their mortgage broker had suggested that a 3-year deal looks quite attractive at the moment, to which he responded by saying, yeah, but at the end of the 3-year deal, what is the world going to look like? That's going to coincide roughly with an American and a British election. We could have fascists in the White House and fascists in Downing Street, and the economic impact of fascism always hurts ordinary people. So would you sign that now? I don't know. So that's the micro, that's the personal, that's the left brain. How is it hitting you? How is it affecting you? What are the facts of it? Pensions? How are your pensions? And I don't normally do phone-ins like this because I'm an idiot, right? And despite being 54 years old, I've still, in my mind somewhere, got the attitude to finances of a 14-year-old boy. Everything, or of Mr. McCorber. Something will come up. We'll be fine. Happily, I married someone who's a bit more responsible than I am. So we're probably not going to disappear over the precipice of financial oblivion in 5 years' time. But if you are a grown-up and you pay attention to these things, prices, mortgages, also, of course, I'm insulated by my income from some of the most sharp edges of economic difficulties. Let's not beat about the bush or pretend otherwise. But most of the people making these decisions are also very insulated. In fact, most of the people wanging on about what a good idea it would have been to hop into bed with Donald Trump are even more insulated from the realities of what that would have created than almost anybody else in the country or the world. If you've got $500 million to spare on a probably insider trading bet, then you are unlikely to be affected by the cost of gas or indeed the cost of baked beans. But you are. And I want you to tell me what's going on. I really do. Alyssa hits the floor running. This is an example of what might sound prosaic, but occasionally is very important. My weekly, normally £40 shop, including cat food, was £60 yesterday. I nearly cried in Aldi. So how is it affecting you? 0345 6060 973. And then we move to the other side of the brain, the big picture, the right side of the brain. And this is where my own instincts take me more readily than they do to the left side. So I really need your help with the detail, the small questions, if you like, the personal as opposed to the political. But I also want your help with the political, with the meta, with the big picture. There was a moment, I wasn't alive, but maybe you were. There was a moment in 1956 when the House of Commons was debating Suez. Anthony Eden, the Prime Minister at the time, talked about what the British government was and was not prepared to do. And his government was not prepared to embark on a policy of abject appeasement. They thought, he thought, we thought that you could call President Nasser's bluff regarding the internationalization of the Suez Canal. It did not end well, and what it taught us in 1956 was that Britain had ceased to be a major player on the world stage. What are we learning this week? What have we learned this month from events? I have learned that one man should not be able to wield the sort of power that Donald Trump has been wielding in ways that I never learned when the incumbent in the White House was perhaps not the most competent person on the planet, but was not avowedly corrupt. That idea that the very nature of US democracy is fatally flawed because it can allow someone like Trump to climb to the top of the tree, that is a big picture lesson. 0345 6060 973. So I want the little picture lessons, what's going on in your world, financially, economically, and I want the big picture. What are we learning? And can I do this? How's it making you feel? How's it making you feel? Your financial advisor says the world is on fire. Or your mortgage broker says the world is on fire. What do you want me to do? How's it all making you feel? I interviewed someone yesterday who's a brilliant satirist which means that historically they've always had a very close relationship with the news. And they said to me, I'm having to look away more than ever at the moment. I said, oh, great, my kids need shoes. You look away from the news, you're probably not tuning into this.
Now let's focus on what might be the most striking detail in all of this: the scale of the money involved. Because reports indicate that around $500 million in bets were placed on the oil markets just before that key announcement. Take a moment to think about that. $500 million. That's not the kind of figure that moves casually. That level of investment immediately raises a different kind of question. Not just about what happened, but about who is in a position to act on that scale. Because to even consider placing that kind of money into the market, you have to be operating in a very specific circle, a space where resources are vast and decisions are made with a level of confidence most people simply don't have access to. And that leads to a deeper thought. What if, for those placing these bets, it didn't feel like a risk at all? Because under normal circumstances, putting that amount of money into the market carries enormous uncertainty. Prices can move in unexpected ways. Outcomes are never guaranteed. But imagine a different scenario. Imagine someone saying, yes, it's a huge amount of money, but you don't need to worry about losing it. Because the outcome is already known. Because the moment a certain announcement is made, the market will respond in a very specific way. In this case, the expectation would be clear. An announcement suggesting peace negotiations would likely push oil prices downward. And if you already knew that announcement was coming, and roughly when, then your position in the market wouldn't be based on guesswork. It would be based on timing, and timing in this context changes everything. Because once the announcement is made, the reaction follows, prices adjust, and those who position themselves in advance are left deciding only one thing: when to take their profit. Now that doesn't prove anything on its own, but it does raise a question that's difficult to ignore. Because when you combine that level of financial movement with that level of timing, it becomes harder to see it as coincidence alone. And that's where the concern begins to grow. Please don't forget to subscribe because it really helps this channel grow. Thank you for watching and see you in the next one.